Two things in our two backyards that almost no one reported. In Gaza, the Israeli army received a new order, and it's not to advance, it's to stop. This time, it's to stop, not to advance beyond the roughly 65 to 70% of the Gaza Strip. And in Lebanon, a report came out that, if true, changes the logic of everything happening there. The Americans would be trying to sit down and talk directly with Hezbollah, even more absurd there. In this live stream, I'm going to tell you exactly what has changed inside the Gaza Strip in the last few days, including a complaint that's coming from the Israeli soldiers themselves on the ground. And I'm going to show you what the army is building along the yellow line, which is already showing up in satellite images and that a lot of people out there are calling a new border in the Gaza Strip. And then I'll take you to southern Lebanon with the 3 updates of the week. What's happening with the UN peacekeeping force? Does anyone still remember it? UNIFIL? When the mandate of this peacekeeping force ends? Who wants to take its place? And there's also this story about direct talks with Hezbollah. And in the end, I'll take you to the other conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which has disappeared from the news but hasn't stopped for a second. Because there is something happening over there that I need to show you, and it says a lot about what the next wars of the next 20 years will look like. Live from Israel, straight from where everything is happening, organizing the chaos of information for you. Leave your like now at the beginning so you don't forget to do it later. And also check if your subscription is still active and turn on the notification bell, because that's what lets you know when I go live, right in the middle of a turning point here in the region. Let's start here with Gaza and let's go in the order that matters, okay? After the meeting between the Israeli Prime Minister, for those who remember, and the American envoy, the army reinforced an instruction that had already been given to the troops on the ground weeks ago. The instruction is as follows: stop pushing the yellow line to the west, that is, further into the Gaza Strip. Today, Israeli forces hold something between 65 and 70% of the territory of the Gaza Strip. And along with this order came another one, which in my opinion is even more important. The troops on the ground were instructed to document on video every Hamas violation along the yellow line. This line we're seeing here, this line that in this case is purple, but here in Israel we call it the yellow line. And actually all over the world it's called the yellow line, but here it appears on this map in purple. There's no way to change that. Film, record and keep a record of all Hamas movement along this line. For you to really understand what this means, when the army orders to film instead of shoot, they're building a case, not mounting an operation. On one hand, that's good, but on the other hand, it's also bad. They're building the evidence that will justify the army's reaction when it comes, on the day it comes. And that's where the part that's bothering people inside comes in. The soldiers who are on the front line are complaining. Exactly here, on this line, folks, on the defense line here, they're complaining, and this is what they're saying. Since the government decided to implement the agreement the way the Americans requested, the rules of engagement have become stricter. Today, just to give you an idea of how absurd it is, a soldier can only shoot if the terrorist crosses the line and poses an immediate and clear danger to the troops. If he's on the other side, watching, filming, tracking the troops' routine, no one can shoot. And that's exactly what Hamas is doing. And here I need to say what I think about this, because this, my friends, is absurd. A terrorist standing in front of the soldier. Imagine this situation. Studying the shift change schedule. That's the beginning of the next attack. Everyone here should already know that. This kind of rule shows that there are still people here in Israel acting with the same mindset they had before October 7th. The mindset that it's possible to live with a threat on the other side of the fence as long as it stays quiet and doesn't cross over. Of course, this is an absurd American demand. It was this mindset that led us to October 7th. And it's still alive somewhere inside where decisions are made. The name of the thing changed and the line was moved, but the logic is exactly the same. According to reports in the Israeli press, they sent people up to the line to gather information and observe our soldiers, studying the schedule, shift changes, and the troops' behavior. And meanwhile, they train very close to that line and put even more pressure on the population in the streets of Gaza. One of the fighters summed it up like this. He said, "They see the terrorists right in front of them and their hands are tied." And there was another detail that shows the cynicism of the other side. The Israeli unit that coordinates civil affairs published a notice in Arabic addressed to the residents of the Gaza Strip. The text says that Hamas is deliberately pushing residents closer to the yellow line, ignoring the risk to these people's lives. In other words, the closer these people get to the soldiers, the greater the risk of them being eliminated. because there's also the total risk that they could be terrorists. And they ask residents not to follow those orders and not to come near. This is the request from the Israelis, not to get close and not to become victims once again of Hamas's own decisions. Because one thing is to get close to the yellow line and another is to cross the yellow line. And that's what Hamas is asking the residents to do. Pay attention to what's happening here. It's the Israeli army warning the residents of Gaza not to do what Hamas itself is telling them to do. And there's also something happening inside the Gaza Strip that almost no one is talking about and is hardly appearing in the news abroad. And that explains Hamas's desperation. On the other side of the yellow line, here on the inside, okay? On this side here, that's where a real war is happening, and it's Palestinians against Palestinians. Today, there are more than 10 armed groups inside Gaza that you didn't know existed, right? 10 armed groups, but they are not Hamas. And several of them took up arms precisely to confront Hamas. The most well-known is the one called Popular Forces, which had something like 700 armed men and originated in the Rafah region. Does anyone remember this group? Its founder was killed in December in a fight within the group itself, and the one who took over was the former deputy, Abu Shabab, who was also killed in a fight. He shouldn't have died. They fought among themselves. And one of the members killed Abu Shabab. There's also a group there in Khan Yunis. There are armed clans in Gaza City, and there are entire families that have been in open conflict with the terrorist organization since the ceasefire. And Hamas is reacting in the way it knows, hunting these people down, arresting them, and executing in public squares those it accuses of collaborating. At the beginning of this month, Hamas's internal security force published a call directed at the members of these militias themselves, saying that their salvation would be to eliminate their own leaders. In other words, on top of everything, they are trying to fight the rival group by paying its own members to turn on it. And today I saw images of this rival group arresting Hamas members, all with their eyes closed, lying on the ground on their backs. Anyway, they arrested several Hamas members there in the Rafah region. This is a portrait of an organization that has lost its monopoly on armed force within Gaza itself. Within Gaza itself. And that's why Hamas really needs the appearance of calm with Israel right now, because its real fight today is within what's left for it to control. And now the part that made headlines abroad. An international agency released satellite images showing that Israel, showing this right here, look. Showing that Israel is building along the yellow line, okay? Along. This here is close to the yellow line. I don't know if you can see it. Look here. We're seeing an embankment wall here, okay? With more than 23 kilometers built going from the north of the Gaza Strip towards the south. I will put another photo here, look. There are several photos of this location. Can you see the embankment there? There are many places there in the Gaza Strip with that little dirt mark there. It already covers more than half the length of the Gaza Strip, and construction continues in the direction of the city of Rafah. The army confirmed the construction and said it's meant to protect the troops and the neighboring Israeli communities, those that were attacked on October 7th. And the world is reacting as expected, as always, talking about a permanent border, disguised annexation, violation of the agreement, as always, right folks? I'll give you my take on all of this, what this really is. There's a difference between a border and an obstacle, and it's not legal, it's practical. And in a war like this, a border, you go there and draw it on the map and sign it on paper and say, that's your border. And an obstacle, which is what we see now, I say this because you see this in the news soon, folks. You see this in the news soon. An obstacle, you put it up just to prevent a terrorist with an explosive vest from crossing on foot at night without anyone noticing he is passing through. And until disarmament happens, it's obstacles that save soldiers' lives, not signatures on documents. Let me make that very clear. If this explanation is helping you understand what the headline doesn't tell you, give it a like now. It only takes a second. And there were two incidents on the yellow line over the weekend that are worth telling together. Look, I'll put our yellow line here again, or our purple line in this map's case. Here, look. This weekend, look what happened. Here, we've already started the week, right? The first day of the week, which is actually Sunday, everyone starts working. So, when I say weekend, I'm referring to Friday and Saturday here in Israel, because they show the two extremes of what's happening there. And only here we will really understand and see what happens in the Gaza Strip. In the first one, in the south of the Strip, 3 terrorists crossed the line and approached the troops and were eliminated. And in the second one, on the same day, a Hamas terrorist crossed the line and surrendered to the Israeli soldiers. Second, An American official who interviewed and interrogated this guy. The man said he had been recruited by Hamas recently and that he regretted joining Hamas. This contrast, my friends, is a portrait of what remains of the organization. Some keep passing the line to measure our reaction, while others cross it to flee the organization. That's what's happening now in the Gaza Strip, for those who wanted more information. Now let's move up here to the north, to southern Lebanon, where there were three new developments this week. The first is the shelling that hasn't stopped for a single moment. In the early hours of Friday and Saturday, Israeli fighter jets attacked the Kfar Ruman region and the hilltop that I've already explained to you in previous live streams, which is located in the Nabatea province. Let me put it here, our part of Lebanon. The attacks continued over there. The second piece of news is that the clock is ticking for the UN peacekeeping force. That force's mandate ends this year, 2026. They've been in Lebanon, my friends, since 1978. Today, there are about 7,500 soldiers from almost 50 countries, and in recent months, they've been handing over positions here in this region, below the Litani River, to the Lebanese army, one by one, because they're going to live there by the end of the year. And I need to tell you here what this force has actually done during all this time they've been there. Since the 2006 war, a Security Council resolution determined that southern Lebanon should remain demilitarized. Southern Lebanon is below the Litani River, and only the Lebanese army was supposed to have weapons there, with the support of the UN force. Supporting. Hezbollah hasn't handed over anything at all since then. Hezbollah rebuilt everything, dug tunnels, set up observation posts, and accumulated an arsenal that grew to over 100,000 rockets and missiles, many of them stored inside family homes. And Hezbollah did all of this right under the nose of the UN peacekeeping force. In some cases, just a few dozen meters from the UN's own base. There was a Hezbollah base right next to it. When Israel asks for an explanation, the answer is always the same. They say they don't have a mandate to stop anything at all, and that their role is just to observe and report. In other words, 48 years on the ground just to become witnesses to something they were sent to prevent, because that was the resolution over there. And here comes the question that nobody in Lebanon wants to answer out loud. Who is going to take the place of this force that's leaving, the UNIFIL, which was absolutely useless? There is a French and Italian initiative now to set up a new force that would operate side by side with the Lebanese army. And there is another country knocking on the door to join this force. Guess which country it is, you guys watching this live. Guess which country wants to be part of this peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon? Turkey. The Lebanese president was in Ankara this month, and the regional press reported that the Turks are interested in joining this future multinational force in the south. Look at how big a pattern that's forming here. In Syria, Turkey is trying to set up bases and a military presence anywhere in Syria, and now they got attacked when they tried to set up at a base there. In Lebanon, they want to send troops to the northern border of Israel, this time wearing the UN International Community's helmet, right? With the UN Peacekeeping Force seal. That's what they want. And in Gaza, they show up as one of the mediators of this agreement between Hamas and Israel. And on a larger scale, they signed a defense pact in Mecca with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. As I've been telling you in the last few live streams, a new axis has already been born, and its center is no longer Tehran, it's in Turkey. While Iran sings in its own economy, Ankara is taking over every space that's left, and they're doing it with uniforms and international approval. Pay close attention, because we've been seeing more and more talk about Turkey in recent days, and from now on, we're going to hear a lot more about it. And the third piece of news is the strangest of all, and I'm bringing it here as a report because that's what it is, a report. The president of an American organization connected to Lebanon, who is also a former ambassador there, was in Beirut in recent days, and he spoke to a local television station in Lebanon. He said that his delegation discussed the matter with American officials at the embassy, and the response was that the American president is serious about the possibility of talking directly with Hezbollah. According to him, the American government believes that the organization is still not serious enough to have this conversation, and this didn't come out of nowhere. A report published a few weeks ago stated that in May, the American president called the Lebanese embassy in Washington and requested a direct conversation with Hezbollah, but the request was denied. The president himself has already said in public that he talks to everyone, President Trump included, even with people that many think he shouldn't talk to. He wants to chat with everyone, right folks? It's always like that. Trump in the end doesn't solve everything. Now, my take on this, and it may be hard for you to hear, is that direct talks with Hezbollah are terrible news. Hezbollah spent 2 years taking hits and refusing to talk with the Lebanese state about handing over weapons to the Lebanese state itself. And the day they sit down directly with the Americans, they stop being an illegal militia within the country and become an interlocutor with an address in the United States. And that's exactly the upgrade. We can call it the political move that a terrorist organization looks for when it's weak on the ground. And meanwhile, the organization hasn't delivered. Not a single thing, it gets people angry. Absolutely nothing north of the Litani River and nothing south of the Litani River moving into the area. The Lebanese army continues to consolidate control in some southern cities as part of the pilot zone program and keeps repeating the same difficulty. You don't even know what they are talking about. Pay close attention, they say. The Lebanese army points out that the country's law over there in Lebanon doesn't allow soldiers to enter people's homes to search them. You're listening carefully, right, folks? Because this explains the paralysis of that entire country. If the arsenal is buried under the house and sometimes even inside the house itself, and the law says you can't enter the house, then disarmament becomes a conversation about what? About what's left in the area around the house, which is the yard, right? And nothing more than that. And in the midst of all this, the Vatican also published a note expressing serious concern about the way the agreement between Israel and Lebanon is being implemented. That's it, just making a note, just this statement here, so you can't say David didn't talk about it. I did. And I also note the question that no one in the Vatican answered. Concern about which part of the agreement exactly? What is your concern? Because half of that agreement is the disarmament of a terrorist organization, and that half hasn't moved forward so far. It's still going on over there, and now, just so we can wrap this up, this is going to be a really quick live stream. It won't be very long, okay? Just making it very clear to you all that just a little while ago, just a piece of information here to change the subject and move on to Iran. Just a little while ago, a member from Iran said that they received the proposal to join the Mecca Agreement. Remember the Mecca Pact involving Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia? The claim was that Iran had received a proposal to join the Mecca Agreement. Whether what he said is true or not, we'll find out in the next few days, which would be absurd, absolutely huge. Imagine Iran joining the Mecca Agreement now. That means any attack on Iran would be an attack on Saudi Arabia, on Turkey. And it doesn't make sense, guys. It doesn't make any sense, okay? It doesn't make any sense, especially because it's a Shia country, and the other country there is Sunni. But he said it, and I'm recording this here for you too. And now I want to end this live with a topic that has disappeared from the news. Vanished. Disappeared from the news as if it wasn't happening. And I think you need to know about it too. The war between Russia and Ukraine has entered its 5th year. No one talks about it anymore. It's impressive how it disappeared from the news. But it has changed form, and this change says a lot about the future. In the last 2 months, Ukraine has stopped mainly targeting barracks and military positions. It started targeting warehouses, not ammunition warehouses. Pay close attention. These are e-commerce warehouses. The preferred target became Wildberries, I think that's how you pronounce the name of this store, which is the largest e-commerce retailer in Russia. It's like Mercado Livre in Brazil, or their version of Amazon. And yesterday, the campaign also got a new target. For the first time, Ukrainian drones hit another logistics center of Ozon, which is the second largest online retailer in the country. The warehouse is located in the Samara region. It stopped operating, there were injuries, and more than 500 employees had to be evacuated from that building. And on the same night, a refinery in that region was also hit, which produces jet fuel. The Russian defense says it shot down 457 drones just that night, and the number of deaths that night exceeded half a dozen, including civilians. Just look at the pattern. In the same batch, e-commerce and fuel. Since mid-July, long-range Ukrainian drones have hit more than 20 facilities of this company, which are spread across Russia. According to the Ukrainians themselves, 7 out of the 10 largest distribution centers of the company are already out of operation, meaning they were destroyed. A survey mentions about 1.8 million square meters of warehouse damaged, which is close to a fifth of everything the company owns. And among the centers hit, the one south of Moscow has 250,000 square meters by itself. It's gigantic, and there's something here that needs to be clear, because it changes the meaning of these attacks. The ones who lose in this kind of warehouse aren't just the companies that own the building. You need to understand this. This building doesn't belong to the government or to any special organization in Russia. It's owned by a company. These centers work like Mercado Livre. The ones selling there are small business owners, people who bought goods, put everything in that warehouse, and make a living from it. When the warehouse burns, it burns the stock of thousands of families, and most of them don't have any insurance to cover it. In other words, the attack hits ordinary people's wallets before it hits the state's coffers. And that's exactly the stated goal, to make the war hit home for those who until now in Russia could pretend that this war didn't exist. And that's not all, okay? The same campaign has been hitting refineries and fuel depots, and the result has shown up in people's lives. There are also lines at gas stations inside Russia, and the waits aren't just 30 minutes. For those who are wondering, there are regions where drivers are waiting days just to fill up their tanks, with gas stations rationing how many liters each person can take. And on the other side, Russia is doing the same thing, but in the opposite direction. In recent days, it attacked Ukraine's port infrastructure in the Odessa region on the Danube River and has previously also hit logistics centers where Western weapons were stored. And on Friday, Russian drones hit a shopping mall in central Ukraine. Guys, a shopping mall. Pay close attention. A shopping mall. At least 16 people died and more than 130 were injured. I saw that. The drone crashed right into that shopping mall. And when the emergency teams, ambulances, doctors, and paramedics arrive to help, a second drone comes and crashes right on top of those emergency teams. 2 days before that, the capital suffered one of the biggest attacks in recent months. There were 17 people killed in Kyiv and the surrounding areas, with a hospital, school, daycare, residential building, and several warehouses damaged. In one of the neighborhoods, a 9-story building simply collapsed, and the Russian army said what it was targeting: military and industrial facilities, transportation and logistics center, and warehouses. Again, that same word, warehouses. This was the day before that wave of Ukrainian attacks I just told you about. And that's how this price keeps being paid, on both sides. And look, both sides are doing this, no exception. Neither of them is really trying to win on the battlefield. That's very clear. Both are trying to break the other's ability to move things from one place to another. And here's something that almost nobody puts together, but the Ukrainians have been putting together for years. In March this year, the president of Ukraine gave an interview to an Israeli newspaper and summed up the situation in one sentence: just. He said that Israel has what Ukraine needs against Russia, and that Ukraine has what Israel needs against Iran. And in the same interview, he mentioned something that's highly relevant to those who live here in Israel. That Iranian drone that Russia uses by the thousands has been refined over years of use against Ukraine. I've already made a video about this here, that the Iranian weapon was improved in Russia and then, in part, returned to Iran itself. He talked about nights with 35 to 500 Iranian drones at the same time, every day and every night. Iranian drones launched by the Russians. And his conclusion was the following from Zelensky: the threat that reached the Middle East wasn't born yesterday. Ukraine saw it first, suffered first, and paid for the lesson with civilian blood. And it's not the first time he's made this connection. Right after October 7th, he had already said that it was the same evil there, just in a different form. According to him, on one side there's a terrorist organization that attacked Israel, and on the other side there's a country that attacked Ukraine. And the essence of both cases is exactly the same. You may agree or disagree with the Ukrainian president, and that's up to each person to agree with and support one side or the other. But just look at the map, which is what matters here. The same drone, the same manufacturer, the same instructors, on both sides, okay? And on both sides, the West is supporting. Those who are taking the hits, pay close attention. But there's a big difference here between the two types of aid. In Ukraine, Western aid is announced at press conferences, with packages approved in parliament and flags in the photos, and here, most of it is silent. There are European countries that vote against Israel in international forums in the morning and maintain security cooperation with Israel at night. We've even seen Israeli parts, Israeli technologies, in countries that claim to be enemies. There's an Arab neighbor who helped shoot down Iranian drones and missiles in the sky and never admitted it publicly here. And there are Ukrainians working right now in a Gulf country teaching Arabs how to intercept Iranian drones. Because they have 4 years of experience in this, now 5 years, and that experience was bought at a very high price, right? With many lives. So when someone tells you that these are two separate wars, you already know the answer. They are two addresses from the same sender. And now I'm going to raise a question for you. But first, I want to make something very clear about the war between Russia and Ukraine itself. I'm not going to take either side here. It's a tragedy anywhere in the world. And there, ordinary people die on both sides every day. It doesn't matter if they're Russian or Ukrainian. People die every day. I'm not going to paint anyone as a hero or a villain for you today, but look at the pattern, because it's new. No one needs to invade a country to bring it down anymore. Just stop the trucks, burn the warehouses, and cut off the fuel. The soldiers are still on the field, but the ones who decide the outcome are the supply chains. And there's something about all this that makes me raise my head and pay close attention. I'm going to share this with you as a question, not as a statement. Because right now, in two different wars in the same year, the main target has become logistics. Here in our region is the naval blockade and the strait. Over there is the warehouse, the train, the refinery, and the depot. There are people and theories that say it's just a technological coincidence. Drones have become cheap enough to fly 1,000 kilometers and burn down a warehouse, and no one can defend that warehouse. And there are also those who say it's a new doctrine, taught in the same courses, in the same war manuals, to the same officers. And there are some who go even further. Some people are saying that the world is being pushed to redesign its entire supply chain. And those who knew about this before, they are buying cheap today what will become very expensive tomorrow. And what would that be? What in practice, right? In these theories that are going around, they're not mine, they're just theories, okay? And some are proven. Bridge, cargo terminal, which is where everything comes in and goes out, railway and land corridor to get around the sea when the sea is closed off. Warehouse and distribution center near the big cities to avoid the risk of attacks. Maritime insurance company, which is the one that decides if a ship is worth the trip or not, if there's risk or not. Refinery and fuel depot, which are the heart of any logistics operation, and agricultural and mineral land at the end of that line. And look, this is interesting, guys. This part here isn't theory, it's public record. Did you know that the founder of Microsoft is now the largest private owner of farmland in the United States, with almost 250,000 acres spread across nearly 20 states? Did you know that? He says there's no plan behind this, that these are decisions made by a professional investment team and that he just wants to increase the productivity of the farms. And the owner of Amazon has also joined the land rush. And the same trend is happening with investment funds, buying farmland in Brazil and even in Ukraine. I can't say what goes through these people's minds. I'm not going to pretend I know what's going on behind all of this either, but something big is happening. But when a man who made a fortune with software starts getting into technology, right folks? Starts buying food and land, he's making some kind of prediction about the future now. And it's exactly this kind of asset that China has also been buying around the world for 2 decades, and that Qatar has also been buying in Europe, quietly and sometimes not so quietly. And Turkey has now entered this competition right here in our region. I don't have proof of any of these 3 things. And I'm not going to sell you a theory here as if it were news, but I'm just noting a fact and no one disputes it. In 2026, if someone wants to bring down a country, they no longer need to take its territory. They just need to control the routes through which things get there. And that's where I wrap up. With our Hebrew word of the day, the word is sharsheret, sharsheret, which means chain, chain, chain. Those that go like this, that holds this kind of chain, okay? We use this when we talk about the supply chain here in Israel, fuel supply chain and moving ammunition from one place to another. In old wars, you used to win by taking the enemy city, remember that? And wars nowadays are won by cutting the chain. The other side's ship that doesn't get through, the warehouse that burns, the bank that closes, the weapon that doesn't reach the tunnel. And whoever understands this first will make it through the next decade in one piece. And I'm still here, straight from Israel, straight from the Judean mountains, putting these pieces together one by one, in a way that the Great Bible doesn't do for you. And for those who are asking, yes, it's Bill Gates, the owner of Amazon. Qatar is buying land in Europe, in other parts of the world, also in Africa, Qatar. The United Arab Emirates are also doing exactly the same thing. In other words, they are expecting something big to happen in the future. Guys, pay close attention to these moves that almost nobody notices. We're just looking at war and noise. Meanwhile, the big players who used to invest in advanced technology and artificial intelligence are now simply buying farmland. Why is that, right? Why is that? I'm asking you to leave your answers in the comments, each with your own theory. Thank you, Karen, for the super chat. Thank you for the precise information, Agnaldo. Good afternoon, Eunice. Thank you, Vera. I've already reserved my spot on the caravan. Okay, Joel, thanks. Carlos, thank you, my brother. Thank you for your participation. Who are these registrations for? Registrations are still open. Guys, and look, on the 27th, I think it's the 27th or 26th, the voting for iBest starts. The competition for the top 20 begins once again. When it starts, I'll leave the link pinned here for you to follow and vote, right? Vote here on the channel. So that's it, my friends. This is today's live. If anything serious happens in the Middle East, I'll be back at any moment. And tonight, I'll bring more information about Iran. We will definitely have more information about Iran and more news about Gaza and Lebanon. Best wishes to all our friends in Israel and see you in the next live stream.